track at Le Mans. For most of the afternoon, Corvette dominated the GTE Pro class as Toyota led the field in hypercar and the LMP2 through the night and into the next day.
The FIA aims to make it possible for potential new Formula One teams to express interest in competing, sending the clearest indication to date that the grid may grow over 10 teams. Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the president of the FIA, tweeted that he has instructed his staff to review the process for starting and expressing interest in joining new F1 teams. It represents a substantial advancement for possible future F1 competitors. What teams are going to enter F1 racing? How did FIA select the teams? How many teams got selected? Want to know more? Then what are you waiting for? Let's get started. Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today, we are going to discuss about FIA has made an insane announcement regarding new teams, particularly Andretti Global, which has been the most outspoken about its intention to join the grid over the last year in the wake of its unsuccessful attempts to acquire the Sauber-run Alfa Romeo participation American racing juggernaut, confirmed their ambition to enter F1 in 2024. When Andretti announced their plan in February of last year, the FIA stated that it was not currently in a position to consider potential new F1 participants. This was primarily motivated by F1 stakeholders' concerns that bringing in new teams would jeopardize the stable franchise model that had been developed in recent years. These worries are related to a clause in the most recent Concord Agreement, which all 10 current teams agreed to in 2020, which states that to waive the anti-dilution fund for any new entrant, majority approval from all 10 existing teams must be obtained. The anti-dilution fund would be established as a $200 million fund that would be paid by any new entrant and shared equally among current competitors. Ben Sulayem's recent speech, which made no specific mention of Andretti or any other rumored new manufacturer who might join Audi in committing to F1, however, seems to signal a change in the FIA's strategy. Additionally, F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali hinted at the FIA and F1's openness to welcome additional teams at the end of last year, saying a high-quality proposal that would add value to F1 would be welcome. F1 stakeholders are constantly looking for new manufacturers, and more funding for current teams is always welcome, especially now that all 10 teams have a chance to turn a profit. Unknowns are the specifics of the process that Ben Sulayem is alluding to, but it would be the first significant new admissions procedure in fewer than 10 years. 3 of the 15 applicants who competed to join the 2010 grid were successful, but they disappeared over the course of the following 7 seasons. However, a subsequent request for expressions of interest in late 2013 led to the arrival of Haas, which is now competing in its 8th season of Formula One. Following FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem's hint about finding a new entry, the likelihood of another Formula One team joining the grid soon is therefore more likely. The FIA, F1's governing body, will therefore take into consideration starting a process to solicit expressions of interest from potential new F1 teams, although it is uncertain whether an additional 11 or more teams will join the grid. Ben Sulayem's quick post on Twitter on Monday this week suggests that the attitude is shifting, at least in terms of formally assembling and reviewing the interested bids, even though the FIA still claims it is not in a position to examine potential new entrants. This is a significant improvement from this time last year when the FIA claimed it was unable to do so. Even as recently as November 2022, F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali stated that they were not in the best position to discuss a serious new entry. The last time this occurred was in December 2013, when F1 and the FIA were looking for a single new team, which led to the creation of Haas's F1 spot. It's important to note that the FIA has always stipulated that if no applicant is deemed suitable by both the FIA and the commercial rights holder, then the commercial rights holder shall determine which teams are eligible to compete for a spot on the grid. No additional team will be chosen while the FIA has pushed for a formal system to start through Ben Sulayem F1, but the teams will still play a big part in looking through the expressions of interest and choosing which ones are worthwhile considering. This process won't start until the FIA publishes a call for expressions of interest, which usually makes a lot of information public, such as the starting point for the new entry to the championship, which is typically at least a full year away at the earliest. Since a formal expression of interest is a thorough process, the potential team needs to be quite advanced and be able to show that a company has been accredited, among other requirements, providing details on relevant qualifications, such as technical proficiency, racing expertise, facilities, equipment, and engineering resources. This is part of the sales presentation. Park distorted the job interview process, while each director and officer of the firm must submit a CV and cover letter outlining their qualifications. Any team that pays this and registers their interest by the deadline will be given the specifics of the selection process. Teams that submit full applications will be charged a significantly higher fee, which was $100,000. There will almost certainly be an initial administration charge of a few $1,000s to pay. Because it has happened before, it shows how seriously the FIA takes the process and how well it works to cull out the weakest entries right away. Following that, a thorough due diligence examination will be carried out, with a selection criterion comprising the team's technical ability and resources, the capacity to generate and maintain adequate funds to contend at a competitive level, the team's experience, and human resources. The FIA and F1 are essentially looking for guarantees of long-term stability, as well as the value that the candidate may offer to the championship, with a particular emphasis on the value that the candidate may offer to the championship. This time on avoiding the dilution that has been discussed so much in recent years. While this is time-consuming, it is usually resolved quickly. The last time this process was performed, a final decision was made within 3 weeks after the deadline for full applications. In fact, the time span between the official call for expressions of interest and the deadline for full applications. The final decision was made in less than 3 months, so if Ben Sulayem's tweet becomes a formal FIA declaration, we should expect a relatively quick conclusion to the entire process, even if a no new team is ultimately selected. But which teams are interested in joining the grid and which are most likely to join? We'll list the top 4 contenders. F1 Andretti Global. There was undoubtedly a joyful dance in Fishers, Indiana. Michael Andretti has been attempting to launch his own Formula One team for quite some time, but he has been met with opposition from the existing teams each time. Andretti, who is already involved in IndyCar and Formula E, has been hearing from certain team bosses that having 10 teams on the grid is enough wolf, and they do not want to share the enormous prize pool, which is becoming increasingly full because of Formula One success. With the announcement of an 11th or even more teams, it no longer appears to be a question of if, but of when Andretti will make his F1 debut. Guggenheim Partners, an investment firm, has finally agreed to pay the $200 million entry fee, removing a significant stumbling block. Additionally, a new facility in Indianapolis will be developed where Andretti will produce its own F1 cars. Red operations are expected to be well underway in time for Andretti to begin racing in 2024. Calvin Lowe's Formula One team cost a lot of money to start, fortunately for him. According to Forbes, Calvin Lowe has plenty of it. The Hong Kong businessman has $1.7 billion in assets and hopes to have his own Formula One team by the start of the Grand Prix in 2026. It remains to be seen whether Lowe is the individual that the FIA and current teams are looking for. Unlike Andretti, Lowe is primarily interested in joining for business reasons. The billionaire sees F1 as a worthwhile investment now that the sport is so popular worldwide. His ideal scenario involves establishing the team, laying a solid foundation for winning races, and then selling the team for a large sum. The perfect sales pitch at the FIA. For a long time, it appeared that Red Bull Racing and Porsche would collaborate in 2026. Negotiations ended because Red Bull did not want to cede too much control to the Volkswagen Group-owned brand. Porsche, on the other hand, is not giving up. Talks with other teams are said to be ongoing, and Porsche wishes to be an engine supplier. Because a growing number of teams are factory teams, CEO Zach Brown is unlikely to sell more than half of McLaren to Porsche. Only Haas and Williams seem to be viable options. These teams are aware of this, which strengthens their bargaining position. Meanwhile, Porsche is eager to enter Formula One by establishing its own team, which has previously existed and would thus be the appropriate solution. Subscribe to our channel to get our videos regularly, and don't forget to click the bell icon to never miss an update. Thank you for your time. Look forward to seeing you at the next one. Until then, peace.